Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
It's our feature unit. We're going to spend a couple of days looking into India's ancient stepwells. I looked these up, Tom, because I didn't know what they look like, and they're so cool. They're very beautiful. And they seem to be really complex, although they were built long ago. So it's kind of cool what people were doing long before we had computers and technology that we do today. They still figured out a lot of things on their own. They just had different methods. So we're going to take a look at what we can learn from India's ancient stepwells.
Indeed, if you travel to India, you can check out all the wonderful sights to see there, like the Taj Mahal and stuff like that. But hey, if you're into something unique and different, you ought to find some of these stepwells and check them out and take pictures and tell your friends all about them. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get to it. Let's listen to the first day's lesson, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
If you think of Indian architecture, elaborate Hindu temples covered in flowers, or towering constructions like the Taj Mahal might come to mind. But to see some of the greatest ancient architectural marvels of the subcontinent, you do better to look down instead of up. In places like Delhi, the state of Rajasthan, and other northern Indian regions, magnificent stepwells descend deep into the earth via complicated sets of staircases. Though they look like something out of a puzzle book, these ancient structures have an entirely practical purpose: to allow people access to a reliable reservoir of clean water. More than 3,000 stepwells have been identified and mapped around the Indian subcontinent, with origins dating back to the 4,000-year-old Indus Valley civilization, one of the earliest urban societies on Earth. Stepwells are erected along natural slopes, with carefully placed stairs leading to the bottom. Many also boast ornate and detailed carvings and statues. The stepwells were built in such a way that rainwater is routed into them and can be gathered from a pool at the bottom of the well. During rainy seasons, the stepwells might fill to the top, providing abundant water for drinking, bathing, and the other needs of a community. As well as providing a supply of water, stepwells served numerous other, less apparent purposes. They could serve as a retreat on hot days, as the air at the bottom of the well is usually several degrees cooler than at the top. Stepwells also provided spaces for people to gather and socialize. Their waters were often used in religious rituals as well. Their architectural beauty, life-sustaining properties, and ability to connect communities made stepwells an essential part of ancient Indian life.
Okay, let's talk about the contents of today's lesson. We're drawing wisdom from India's ancient stepwells. Interesting title there, because when you take water out of a well, we do use the verb to draw water out of the ground, to take it out of the ground. And in this particular case, we're actually drawing wisdom from India's ancient stepwells. We're learning a thing or two about those stepwells, because sometimes, of course, we have to recognize that ancient people seem to know more about things than we do nowadays. So yes, indeed, they had some great wisdom back then, and we're learning things about those stepwells, and maybe they can help us solve some of our water problems that we're experiencing these days.
Hopefully, yeah. So if you think of Indian architecture, sometimes you think of other things first. You wouldn't necessarily think of these ancient stepwells. At least that's true for me. When you talk about architecture, guys, you're talking about the style of buildings that are designed and built. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, I like the architectures in this neighborhood. No, architecture's non-count. So be careful how you use this. When you're using it, it means you're talking about, again, the style, the design of the buildings themselves. And there's lots of different types of architecture around the world. Now, when you think of Indian architecture, Our author comes up with a couple of examples that might come to mind or spring to mind. Elaborate Hindu temples covered in flowers. Yeah, sometimes I think of that. Or towering constructions, really high, big, imposing constructions. For example, the Taj Mahal might come to mind. The Taj Mahal is so beautiful. That's always the first thing I think of when I think of Indian architecture.
Right, and of course in India, a lot of people are Hindus, which is the religion of India there. So they've got their temples there, Hindu temples, and they can be quite elaborate. And so they're wonderful examples of Indian architecture. And again, you've got the Taj Mahal, which is in all the tourist posters for India.
Yeah.
But to see some of the greatest ancient architectural marvels of the subcontinent, you do better to look down instead of up. Now, if we're talking about the subcontinent, we're talking about South Asia, basically, where India is, and that could also include Pakistan and Bangladesh. That's the subcontinent there. So, yes, indeed, we could talk about some other great ancient architectural marvels. And, of course, you'd look down instead of up, okay? So that's interesting here. A marvel, of course, is something that is really fantastic. It's marvelous. It's wonderful. Remember, marvel is a noun in this case, although it can be used as a verb to marvel at something. You may marvel at the ballet dancer's performance, for example, because it was so great.
Or you might like the superheroes that Marvel Comics produces. So, yeah, Marvel. Something that's pretty amazing that makes you go, wow, that's so cool. And again, it's a noun and a verb. So, yeah, instead of looking up as we typically do if we're trying to admire some piece of architecture, in this case, you're going to look down. I think this is a cute sentence, the way the author wrote that. So in places like Delhi, which is in the state of Rajasthan, and other northern Indian regions, you can see some magnificent stepwells descend deep into the earth. So if something descends, it goes down from a higher level. We use this when we talk about going down different floors in an elevator. It's descending 4 floors, or you're descending down a staircase if you're walking from the top of the staircase down to the bottom. Here, these stepwells actually descend deep into the earth. So it sounds like it goes below ground, right? So you've got ground level. It sounds like they're digging past this level and it's going deep into the earth. How is it happening? Well, it's going via or via. They're both correct pronunciations. I say via. Just means by or through something. How do you get there? So they go via complicated sets of staircases. If you look at the pictures, you can see what we're talking about. It looks like somebody has set up a really complicated puzzle that you're looking at. And it looks like somebody needed to have some math training to come up with these, at least for me, because I think, wow, how did they get that to work out so well?
Interesting. So remember, a well is a hole in the ground to get water. It extends down to the water table. So a step well, of course, is a well that you walk down or you descend deep into. And so it descends or goes down deep into the earth. And you've got these complicated sets of staircases. You could also say stairway. That's the same meaning. Though they look like something out of a puzzle book, these ancient structures have an entirely practical purpose to allow people access to a reliable reservoir of clean water. So that's their purpose here. They look like just something for fun. It looks like it's a big puzzle or something. Just
a tourist attraction, maybe, huh?
Or just for decoration or whatever, which would be a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
But basically, they have a more practical purpose. They're there to help people survive. And yes, indeed, they allow people access to a reservoir of clean water. So access to something means that you can get to that thing. You can get the resources that thing offers. And yes, indeed, people need clean water to live. You need it to drink. You need it to cook with. You need it to bathe with. And a reservoir is an area where water is stored. In my college town of Iowa City, north of town is the Coralville Reservoir, which is a lake that was dammed and there's a bunch of water there. And so there's a water supply there that can be treated and made into drinking water water or whatever.
Yeah. You probably noticed you're hearing a couple of different pronunciations with this word. We have like 4 if you look it up in the dictionary. I say reservoir. Tom says both, actually, reservoir and reservoir. It's a French word, so it started out with reservoir because it just was from the French language. We have something called Lake Powell in Arizona where I grew up, and it's a reservoir. And you could take a boat up there and go fishing and swimming, but it was an artificial lake that was being used as a source of water supply. So that's how I know about reservoirs, Lake Powell, which we love to go and visit in the summer when it was so hot in the desert. Now, moving on, guys, we're going to talk about how many of these stepwells they have. They have more than 3,000 stepwells have been identified and then mapped around the Indian subcontinent. I'm not surprised if you look at the country of India. It's huge. And of course, in order to live, people need water, especially clean water, which isn't always easy to find in some of these, especially the lakes over there. They can be quite dirty. People bathe in them and do their laundry in them and things like that. So getting clean water is essential if you want to survive.
Right, and the Indian subcontinent, of course, refers to the land that extends south from the Himalaya Mountains, which includes India, but again, it could also include Bangladesh and Pakistan. And 3,000 of those stepwells have been identified, and they have origins dating back to the 4,000-year-old Indus Valley Civilization, one of the earliest urban societies on Earth. So indeed, they are quite old, and we are going to continue talking about them in just a couple of seconds, but let's take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今明2天要带大家到印度哦。要看什么呢？我们要看古代印度的一种建筑奇迹，叫做 Stepwells， 也就是所谓的阶梯井。阶梯井是什么？难道是井吗？对啊，真的是井耶，但是是往下走然后取水的所谓的阶梯井。好，那当然我们刚刚提到说要带大家到印度的时候，你脑中可能浮现的是一些Taj Mahal啦，或者是很多的印度寺庙啦，像这样子的建筑物。这文意刚好是我们第一段的第1句，其实它有一个关系子句的简化哦。先行词是逗点之后的 elaborate Hindu temples， 后面 covered 一直到最后面的 Taj Mahal， 句尾之前的第5个单字 Mahal 这个地方，它是关系子句。那它省略的是什么呢？它省略的是 which or that 跟 be 动词。好，那么当然我们刚刚讲到，如果我们还要看一些其他的东西，大概就往下看。往下看呢，就可以看到一些阶梯井。阶梯井像是在哪些地方有呢？像是德里拉贾斯坦邦还有其他印度北部的地区，都可以看到很壮观的阶梯井。这些阶梯井既然是井，当然就是蓄水池咯，这里面的水呢是很干净的水源。那么当然印度的这个次大陆其实就已经被学者标出超过有3000个阶梯井，而且起源会追溯到具有4000年历史的印度河流域的文明，当然是地球上最早的城市文明之一。我们在第2段的第1句特别注意一下，这一句呢，首先动词用的是现在完成式，而且是被动。现在完成被动式 have been identified and mapped。 那么后面呢，我们看到逗点之后的 with origins， 接着是一个简化的关系子句。 with 在这里表示的是附带状况，附带着是有这些起源 origins。 起源如何呢？我们先把 dating 这个字左边左括号，右括号就在句尾的地方。我们刚刚说它是一个关系子句的简化，先把 dating 还原成 which or that 跟 date， 我们再把 date back to 抓出来。所谓的 date back to 指的是某一件事情往前走到某一个时间点，表示起源。好，所以在这里其实句子讲的蛮单纯的，因为句子的正中间其实它分割的就是2个文意，也就是说现在已经有超过3000个阶梯井呢是有被发现，而且被标记出来。逗点之后 它们的起源如何呢？它们的起源就追溯到4000年前的印度和这个流域的文明。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about Indian architecture, in particular, India's ancient Stepwells. These are really cool architectural wonders or marvels of the subcontinent. Instead of looking up at pieces of architectural wonder or marvels, these are things that you're actually going to be looking down at because they go deep into the earth. These stepwells descend into the earth and they have lots of complicated sets of staircases or stairways, as Tom mentioned. They also look like something out of a puzzle book. That was what I thought. I thought, oh wow, these look really hard to have even designed or thought up or built. Some of these are really, really old. We're going to be talking about that. But these ancient structures have a really practical purpose. If something has a practical purpose, it's something that's not just done for beauty or for pleasure. It actually is used for life, just real life every day. And that was that it allowed people to have access to a reliable reservoir of clean water. You have to have clean water to drink if you want to live.
Right, so of course lots of things are built with practical purposes. Sometimes temples are tourist attractions, but they actually have a practical purpose. They're places for people to go to worship at. So yes, they probably put up with the tourists if it's a tourist attraction. But in this particular case, we're talking about stepwells that did have a practical purpose, but nowadays they're probably more like tourist attractions because they are ancient structures and people want to go check them out and take pictures and stuff like that. But they still could be used as a well or something like that. So again, we did talk about the fact that more than 3,000 stepwells have been identified and mapped around the Indian subcontinent, and they have origins dating back to the Indus Valley Civilization, which is 4,000 years old, and that's one of the earliest urban societies on Earth. Stepwells are erected along natural slopes with carefully placed stairs leading to the bottom. So here we've got the word erect. To erect something means to build something. You could erect a building, for example. You could build it. You could construct a building, and these were constructed along natural slopes. Okay, so the land naturally sloped down, and then they carefully placed those stairways or the sets of stairs there.
Staircases, yeah.
And they led to the bottom. So, yeah, you had to go down those stairs to get to the water at the bottom, but still there was water waiting for you. It was worth the effort.
Right, so erect here is a verb, and we use it to talk about constructing something usually that is upright. So it's building a wall, a building. You can even erect a monument to someone. We have lots of monuments and statues here in Taiwan to people who were very important to Taiwan's history. So here we're going to be building some of these stairs or staircases along natural slopes. A slope is when something gradually increases up or goes down. Usually we use this word slope when we're talking about a mountain or a hill. When you go hiking or mountain climbing, if you love that sort of thing, you're probably hoping the slope isn't too steep, which means going straight up, which is much harder than some that have a nice rising slope that isn't too difficult. So these have natural slopes, and then they carefully place stairs that would lead to the bottom. That's how they came up with these. I can't believe they have some dating back 4,000 years, though. That's amazing.
That is quite old, and many of these stepwells also boast ornate and detailed carvings carvings and statues. So they don't just have the stairs, they also have detailed carvings and statues, and they are ornate. Ornate means they're decorative. They're there to make the place look pretty, and of course, they have very special shapes, and they're decorated with lots of patterns and stuff like that. So yes, they boast ornate carvings. A carving, of course, is something that is carved with a knife or various carving tools. You could carve things out of wood or stone, and the resulting work of art is called a carving. And, of course, it's got those carvings there. And also statues, which could be made in a different way from carving, but statues are basically figures of animals or people.
Now, the Stepwells were built in such a way that rainwater, or water from the sky, is routed into them and can be gathered from a pool at the bottom of the well. So all the water would kind of gather at the bottom, and then they could go and get that and take it to their homes for drinking water. Route here is being used as a verb. It just means to send or direct something along a specific path or course or road. I know a lot of people here say route, which is correct as well. So I grew up, and I think Tom did too, saying paper route, delivering papers to homes. When I came to Taiwan, I realized all of you guys were learning route.
Okay.
And I didn't want to confuse anybody, but you should know that you'll hear route used probably more than route if you go to the States, the United States. So the rainwater is rooted into them or routed onto them or into them, and then they gather the water from the bottom of the well. So during rainy seasons, that's when they get a lot of this rainwater falling from the skies. That's when the Stepwells would fill to the top, providing abundant water for drinking, bathing, and other needs that a community might have. Abundant just means more than enough, more than what you need. If you have an abundant resource, you're lucky. You have a large quantity of something.
Right, you have enough and more, basically. So you'd have abundant water that you could drink, that you could bathe with, and you could use it for other needs in a community, maybe to water your plants or whatever. As well as providing a supply of water, Stepwells served numerous other less apparent purposes. So yes, indeed, they did provide a supply of water for various purposes, but they also had some other purposes that were less apparent. They were less obvious. We couldn't really tell exactly what their purposes were. Let's talk about some of those other purposes. For one, they could serve as a retreat on hot days, as the air at the bottom of a well is usually several degrees cooler than at the top. So, of course, during the summer here in Taiwan, sometimes people want to save a little bit of money on their air conditioning bill, so they try to go to someplace cool, like up on top of the mountains, for example, or maybe someplace in a forest, in the shade or something like that.
Nice.
So we could talk about those places as a retreat from the heat, an escape from the heat. Retreat here, of course, is a noun. It just refers to some place that you're going to get away from something extreme like hot weather.
Right, and we'll often talk about going on a retreat, which usually means you take off and you're relaxing for some, amount of time. Maybe you're on vacation. We're going on a retreat up in the mountains. Oh, it sounds so nice. So they could serve as a retreat to get away from that hot, humid air in India, because the air at the bottom of a well is usually several degrees cooler than at the top, which makes sense if you know anything about heat rising to the top. Stepwells also provided spaces for people just to gather and socialize, to get together, talk, catch up on gossip, or the news of the day, and that's where they would get together. Instead of a town square, they would go to these Stepwells in India just to meet people, to say hi, see how people are doing, and just socialize.
Exactly, to talk, to chat, maybe make some music with a sitar and a tabla or something like that.
Yeah.
And their waters were often used in religious rituals as well. So if you talk about a ritual, it's something that you do over and over again. You might have daily rituals when you get up and brush your teeth and have breakfast and stuff like that. Those are your daily rituals. But religious rituals could be when you get together to pray. Christian churches have people come in to service on Sunday. say that is a religious ritual. Or going to a temple here in Taiwan and, bowing down with the incense and praying to your ancestors or to the temple deity, that would also be a religious ritual.
Right. So their architectural beauty, life-sustaining properties, giving people the ability to have clean water would be life-sustaining, keeping life going, and ability to connect communities, letting people gather together and socialize in these stepwells, made them an essential part of ancient Indian life. Something's essential, it's absolutely necessary, it's extremely important. You could say that clean water and air are absolutely essential for us to survive as humans. So, yeah, we learned a lot about this in day one. We're not done talking about them, though. We've got more on stepwells in our next program. Right now, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
那我们谈到这个阶梯井啊，它其实外观是这样，就是它会沿着自然的斜坡建立，然后小心的设置通向底部的楼梯，而且有许多的阶梯还拥有很华丽跟精致的一些雕像啊、雕刻。像阶梯井这种建筑的方式，就能让雨水直接送到下面的这个井底的地方，井底的水池当中呢，水就会汇聚在一起。我们同样看一下第二段。第二段在第4句的这个地方，我们看到一个特别的句型叫做 such that， 如此的以至于。那么 such 跟 that 中间夹的是 in a way， 用什么样的方式？句子原本指的是 the Stepwells were built in a way， 是用一种方法。什么方法呢？ such a way， 这样的方法。that 后面表示结果。所谓的 so that 或 such that 的句型都是表示结果，结果就是雨水就可以直接通往井底的水池当中去做一个汇聚的动作。好，所以在雨季的时候，阶梯井可能会满到顶部哦。那么但是呢，这样子的一个井水可以替社区的饮水啊、沐浴或者是其他的需求提供充足的水源。好，我们在同样这一段的第5句的地方，我们特别看到有一个分词构句。这一个句子当中，第一个动词是 fill， 第二个动词其实是 provide， 所以句子原本应该是逗点之后 and provide， 但是 and 省略，我们把 provide 变成动词 ing。 你可能有点疑惑，为什么常常会有分词构句？为什么 and 常常会省略呢？因为其实在句子当中，如果2个动词是同时发生，那么通常我们会把 and 作为一个省略，第二个动词变动词 ing， 它同时会产生一种动感，而且也有句子简化、言简意赅的功能出现。所以我们可以检查看看，像这一句 fill to the top， 水满了，水满了，其实有水就是可以提供水源，所以其实它是同时发生的动作，就句子会形成简化。好，那么同样在这一句，我们在最后面的 the other needs，其他所有的需求，我们刚刚提到，在列举当中 other 前面如果出现 the 定冠词，就有表示剩下全部的意思，所以在这里我们就把社区的需求全部列举完毕咯。那么当然除了提供水源之外，阶梯井还有一些其他的用途，比如说它会比较凉啊，所以夏天的时候大家会在阶梯井这个地方做一个聚会跟社交。那么其他的水源也会经常被用于一些宗教的仪式，所以其实阶梯井在古代生活当中是不可缺的一个部分。我们明天还会带大家认识更多有关于阶梯井的一些知识哦。我是安娜，我们明天见。
That's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next time because this subject is so fascinating, the subject of ancient stepwells in India, that we're going to come back and talk about them again next time. So please join us then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.